thank everybody who's come out today. I want to thank the governor for taking time to be here with us today, and also for having been extremely diligent when it comes to addressing the issue of gun violence in our state and causing the changes that we have seen at the legislature that puts us at a better place. Last week, we had a series of panel discussions at which the governor was present. We received in our city Congressman Thompson from California, who heads up the gun violence task force that is aspiring to get several acts through Congress that will assist this city and other states with the issue of gun violence. Also, I want to thank Chief Ravella, who is here. We're all working together on this issue. Addressing gun violence is not a new issue to our city. When I was in council, it's an issue we addressed, and I want to acknowledge the presence of our council president, Sean Wooden, Councilman Larry Deutsch. I don't know if there's other council folks present, but they also are working hard on this issue, especially as it relates to bringing our faith-based communities together in the effort of addressing the issue of gun violence. I want to extend my gratitude to the families who are here, who have either lost or have had members of their family injured by gun violence. It is they, and only they, that really can truly appreciate the full gravity of this problem, having lost dear ones and having to deal with the personal losses that they have had to endure. We also have members here of the school security system. We have members here of our police department. My position against gun violence has been crystal clear. When we reestablished the shooting task force, which is now a nationwide model to reduce crime, we strengthened it by doing it in collaboration with other things, the gun buyback program, and partnering with the hospitals. We have written letters to Congress and also try to be more vocal about this issue. As an urban area, we are always going to have to deal with the issues of gun violence. We understand that what we do and anything that we do only goes towards trying to reduce the risk of gun violence. But we also understand that there is more that we can do and more that we should be doing. So this forum really affords us with an opportunity to continue to have that conversation. I can assure you that as mayor, I will do everything that's within my means to continue to address this issue of gun violence. For me, as I've said, it's personal. We've had losses in my family as well. But we cannot sit back and afford to just not attempt to do anymore. That's not an acceptable solution. It's not worthy of us as leaders, and it's not what's required of us. Innocent lives are being lost in our city and other cities around the state. And I'm not happy to sit here knowing that we have had increase in violence this last several days. It always seems to accompany us as the weather gets warmer. And we need to absolutely do more. So thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging in this discussion. And I want to, at this moment, also welcome Gail Hardy, who is sitting at the table. She sits as our Chief State's Attorney for this district, as well as Mr. Kane, who is the Chief State's Attorney and also is very engaged in this issue. So I would like to first have our Chief Ravella, provide some comments and updates, and then we'll continue on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Governor, Chief State's Attorney, guests, council people. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I want to introduce to you what the Hartford Police Department is doing about the violent crime, especially the gun violence in the city of Hartford. We address this as a public health dilemma. Considering that 70 to 80% of your violent crime, your aggravated assaults, occur in the largest cities in your state, they affect the poorest residents and the minority residents. and our gun violence is still the driver. Of the 22 homicides we had last year, 18 were of gun violence. Of the 122 people shot, that's quite a few people. But I do have to remark to you that in 2011 we were on a pace to have over 200 people shot, and we've reduced that dramatically. But how do you do that? Our officers respond to well over 400 calls for service that revolve around shots fired per year. That's a lot of responses to gunfire, either by citizens or by shot spotter alerts. And when you seize, in the last 5 years, almost 1,800 guns from your streets, that's quite a few. That's tough for us to reckon with. When we look to where the guns come from, they come from straw buyers. They come from people that are allowed to buy guns and trade them for drugs. They come from suburban burglaries. They end up on the streets, sold for drugs in such a rapid amount of time. It's tough to cope with. So how did we have these reductions over the past year and a half? You do have a shooting task force, and that's a collaboration with a number of federal and state agencies, to include the Chief State's Attorney's Office, the State's Attorney's Office, the Connecticut State Police, Department of Probation, Parole, Correction, Hartford Police Detectives, Manchester Police, and other suburban areas, where we realized that this gun violence is not just unique to Hartford, it spans the region. Also included in there is a huge cold case effort. I've devoted quite a few detectives with state's attorney, prosecutors, to attack the backlog of cold cases, homicides, that mean a lot to the residents of our city. Our community policing model, ladies and gentlemen, where I devote approximately 70 officers into the community at all times. That's a mid-sized police department around the state that are invested into our community partnerships and relationships. They include command officers, they include community service officers, business CSOs, SROs, and they run the gamut down to condition officers and detectives, because we're invested into the community and partnerships. Our endeavor will prosper, preventing recidivism through organized supervision, partnerships, and enhanced relationships. 5,000 to 6,000 probationers in our city, and we realize that these probationers are our next victims and they're our next shooters. Our CSOs team up with our probation officers, and we're 17% better than recidivism rates around the state. That's remarkable. And it comes with having our probationers get driver's license, education. It's a win-win for both of us. Our best relationships have come with the mothers of the probationers, or the sisters of the probationers that want to keep them out of trouble. Our DMC, disproportionate minority contact with the school board, where we're interrupting the pipeline from high school to prison, reducing the amount of school-based arrests. That's important to us. Our faith-based initiative, and people often ask me, well, what do you expect to accomplish with this, where we put together over 50 places of worship? It's not where you worship geographically, it's where your parishioners live. And I smile and say, well, anything they can do can help us, because these are the partnerships, these are the relationships that we want to form. The police department is opening their doors to releasing information about violent crime, hoping that somebody can have some effect on either retaliation or comfort for the family. Our gun buyback program has exploded this year. We're planning on 3 of them. We have, I believe, up to 8 different partners, all that want to take guns off the street. And we're now targeting handguns. We are targeting handguns because those are the guns that we see on our streets often. Project Longevity. Even though U.S. Attorney David Fine is retiring, the U.S. Attorney's Office is committed to continuing that program. And that's, we're going to impact both victims and defendants on that area. We're going to tell them how they impact our families. They impact the victims' families. They impact the defendants' families for life. We're going to tell them that the police department, if you leave your gun at home, you're going to do much better for yourself. We're going to open doors for education for these young men and women, because those are the people in this gun buyback. Our PAL program is our slice of our 1 to 3,000 kids, and I respect all the other agencies out there that are slicing off groups of children, because we can't keep growing these offenders the way we do. Our domestic violence initiative is actually looking at children around domestic violence, because they drive our aggravated assault numbers as the years go on, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So, to date, we have 7 homicides in the city, and we're running neck and neck from last year, our gains of last year. But I do have to tell you that at this point last year, there were 39 people shot in Hartford, and as of today, there are 28 people shot. We're 11 to the better. 11 less victims, 11 less doctor bills, 11 less hospital visits, and we're proud of that. But I do have to tell you some sobering facts. The robberies are increasing at such a rate, and I scrub the data constantly. Robberies to me are, even though there's violence in there, they're a predictor of violence to come. And I'm doubtful that we can continue our continued success. We call it sustainability in our field. We've made some great strides, so we have to enhance our community relationships and our partnerships. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today and listening so intently. Mr. Governor?
Thank you, Chief. And before we introduce the Governor, we are going to have a period for questions and answers after we get through the panel. So please bear with us. I want to introduce Governor Malloy. He has been a partner in this effort. So much of what we need needs to come to us by way of changes in state legislation and national legislation, and he's been a true advocate for that. And we continue to strengthen the partnership and make sure that we do what is required. Mr. Governor, thank you.
Citizen? No?
Mayor, thank you very much for inviting me. I will tell you that it is 10:25, and I probably have to be on the road at around 5 after 11, so I'm going to make this quick in the hopes that I can hear from some folks as well. By way of explanation of who I am beyond my role as governor, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. I was a mayor of an urban area for 14 years, an urban area that didn't have as high a crime rate as this city, but had a higher crime rate because it was urban in nature than the average community in the state of Connecticut. We were successful in lowering crime by 67% at one point during my administration. By the time the administration was over and the Great Recession had begun, we were at about a 61% overall reduction in crime, and very significantly down in assaults and in homicides. Prior to that, I practiced law, but the first job I had out of law school was as a prosecutor in New York City, in Brooklyn, during the early 1980s, a time of great desperation in urban environments where the AIDS epidemic and the introduction of crack cocaine into our country, was cataclysmic in large urban areas. And we saw an explosion of crime during those periods of time. We also saw an explosion of hopelessness. And that perhaps brings me to where I want to start this discussion personally. I'm doing everything I can to end hopelessness in the state of Connecticut. And that very much begins around the issue of education reform. There is a certain reality in Connecticut that if in large urban environments you fail to properly educate and or graduate 40% of your students, the vast majority of those students being young, male, black, and Hispanic men, then you are reasonably predicting a higher than normal and higher than acceptable crime rate and homicide rate, for that matter, on an intergenerational basis. Just wrap your mind around that. Because we fail to do the things that we know work in our educational system, we are predicting an intergenerational crime wave, generation after generation after generation. So a lot of my efforts on education reform are very much tied to what would otherwise be predicted in a society if we don't change the way we've been educating our young people. Hopelessness is what drives, to a great extent, our crime problems in our urban areas. Hopelessness that also comes about as of a failure to get a high school degree, perhaps take other job training or go on to college if that's a real option. But it really kicks into high gear when a person gets that first conviction. Because in many ways, that means that a young person is going to be unemployable for substantial periods of their life. I've done things to try to prevent early juvenile and young person convictions in the hopes that on an interventional basis, we actually turn lives around before we scar them with a criminal record. That doesn't always work, although in the state of Connecticut, we've seen a fairly rapid decrease in overall crime and a fairly rapid decrease in overall incarceration. And we've also seen a fairly rapid decrease in recidivism. All of those things point to the fact that we're having some success. But obviously in places like Hartford and New Haven and Bridgeport, we have to generate a lot more success, although I applaud the successes that we've had in working together, the state, federal, and local officials. We have so much more to do, particularly when you wrap your mind around the fact that here we are not yet halfway through May, and we've had 7 homicides in this community, 6 or 7 in New Haven already. Their homicides are actually up this year. Similar numbers, I believe, in Bridgeport last time I checked. So whatever we're doing is something, but whatever we're doing is not enough. And that's why I'm very much interested in working with the community and looking at new ideas such as safe zones, nonviolent zones, and potentially funding them to get that off the ground in a state and federal cooperative venture. Also looking to outreach in all parts of our communities, in our major cities. I do believe, as was alluded to, that churches have a role, particularly if they're intervening at an early age in the life of a parishioner, where perhaps there's time and energy to be spent making sure that we don't produce the failure that then produces hopelessness. So that's what I have to say. We will. There's no partner we're unwilling to have in state government. We certainly have lent resources to Hartford. I want to thank the state police and as well as the chief state's attorney and state's attorney for Hartford on the cooperative venture that we have thus far been engaged in. With respect to the chief state's attorney, we had discussions about beginning the program here, and we continue to support the program and support him in his activities as well as our state police activities here. With that, who goes next?
If you can introduce Ms. Gail Hardy, who is our state attorney, if she can please.
The Hartford State's Attorney and I have been friends for a long time. We met about 20 minutes ago. You probably know her better than I do. I'm relatively new to the community. I'll turn the microphone over to her.
Good morning. My name's Gail Hardy. I am the state's attorney for the Hartford Judicial District. And, you know, I always tell people that I'm not a politician by any means. So when I heard our governor say, you know, I've known Ms. Hardy for a long time, I'm thinking, oh, here we go with the politics. But actually, I want to thank you all for being here. Whether you're here because you've lost a family member or a close friend to the violence that goes on or that has gone on in Hartford, or whether you're just here to find out what's going on or to offer some sort of suggestion. Whatever your reason is for being here this morning, I am actually happy to see you here, because this isn't just a law enforcement issue. This is a community issue, and with all of us working together, hopefully we can achieve good results. Chief Ravella spoke about how homicides are down, shootings are down, and all of that is admirable, The police are doing more. We're all trying to do more, but clearly we have a long way to go. So this is a good opportunity for us to throw some ideas out there, get some input from all of you as to where we go from here, what we can do to make our city streets safer, make you feel safe. Not only make you feel safe, but make it safe, make Hartford safe. It is a beautiful city. It is a beautiful city, has its issues like every other urban area has, but it's time for us to do more. It's time for us to make a change. It's time for us to step up and assist law enforcement on finding out who is responsible for the violence. With your help, we can do more. So I'm happy to see you here. A lot of you I know. Those of you who I do know that you are welcome to come to my office. You're welcome to call my office. You may see me out in church or wherever, but I welcome you to come up and to just offer your suggestions at where we go from here and how we get to a point where Hartford is one of the safest cities in the state.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I came here to listen, but I'm glad you asked me to talk. I'll talk only for a minute. I know the governor has a limited time. I love Hartford. I was born in Hartford. I grew up nearby. I went to law school. When I went to law school in the mid-1960s, which actually is just a little while ago, believe it or not, I was a volunteer for a community organization that had an office very close to here. I saw Hartford grow, I saw it change, I saw how wonderful it is, and I saw how wonderful the people who live in Hartford are, and what potential Hartford has before it because of the people in it. Over the years I've seen, and it's really brought obvious this morning, the key to making progress, no matter what we do, no matter what the bottom line, the bottom line to the key to making progress is improved relationships. We've seen it with law enforcement in the last 6 years. We've used very limited resources to get agencies that didn't used to work well together at all to work very, very well together. And Hartford focusing on violence that we started, I think, initially, I've lost track now, 5 years ago, with the shooting task force that began there. It's been key with getting improved relationships between state police, local police, Department of Corrections, parole, probation, and the federal law enforcement authorities working together. That's only a tiny part of it. The bigger part of the key was improved relationships between the law enforcement agencies and the community. Improving talk and discussions, listening to each other, work in progress. Then even a bigger part of it is improved relationships between all of the other organizations which have to go into it, because law enforcement is a critical part of the component, but only a small part of the component. There will always be violent people around. There will always be predators around. And there are a relatively small percentage of people responsible for a very relatively large amount of the violence, whether it's with guns, baseball bats, or bare hands. There are people who are going to impose their will and wishes on others. Many of those people are going to live lifestyles which tend to be attractive to other people on the surface. And prevention it becomes a huge part of the core. So it's all relationships, all component parts have to be looked at together as a whole. You can't focus on one and leave the others go out of balance. But it boils down to relationships between people, communicating between them and their diverse government agencies. I said I'd talk for a minute, I meant it. I went a little too far.
Good morning, my name is Becky Giles-Smith, and I live half of my life in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and the other half here. I'm here to just share that Hartford, Connecticut doesn't lack community support. We have a slew of programs in Hartford, Connecticut. This facility alone, I looked at your program, has a lot of programs. But the problem is the only people that are going to attend are youth that are not at risk. We make the huge mistake of ignoring the root of the problem when we begin to say, let's start reducing crime. We walk right by the issue, which is the guy that's standing on the corner. We walk right by him. The only way that we're going to reduce crime in big inner cities, we have to do exactly to them what they do to us. And that is make it uncomfortable for them to perform their activities in our community. And the only way we're going to do that is if we flood our neighborhoods with police officers. That's what's going to make them uncomfortable to sell drugs and shoot guns. That's the only source. People are afraid to come to the police and tell them, we know who's selling drugs, we know who's doing this. They're in fear of their own lives. We don't have any resources to help us. And that the only way we're going to do it is if we flood our communities with walking police officers. We have to make them feel just as uncomfortable as they make us feel. And that's the only way it's going to reduce crime. Not one more program is going to help, because they're not going to be the ones to join those programs to try to transition their lives.
So I just want to have the panel give some input. One of the things that I've done with this budget is there is an increased request for, obviously, our police department, because we want to make sure that our community has adequate services from the police, but also we understand that some of the services incorporated within the police budget goes toward our youth, health, for example. With respect to recreational facilities, there is a request to increase the hours of operation for the recreation centers, with the hope that we can expand a little bit more of the programming for the young adults. But it is an issue, and it's one that I want to ask both my chief and the governor and others here at the table regarding what additional resources are required, or what additional resources can come to bear, because as I look around the room, there are people here who have been pleading and begging for years now to be part of the equation, to be part of the solution. And when we get to the issue of resourcing again, we find ourselves going back into our very own communities under the threat of mill rate increases in order to cover those services. And it's not something that works for a poor community to have the community pay its way out of problems that were, to a large measure, the result of not of their making, and I brought this up before. So the question is one of resources.
Mr. Smith, it's kind of a long answer for your question. In police work, we try to turn from reaction to some prevention. And when we talk about economic times, we talk about slim budgets. Obviously, we fight for every dime we can with the city council, and I'm hoping they're going to be very generous to us when we talk about police officers. And we talk about a new class, and we talk about the likelihood of 151 officers over the next year and a half or 2 years reaching retirement age. That's a challenge for me as administrator and for my deputy chiefs and assistant chiefs. But we have to also talk about poverty in the city, and as the governor mentioned, education in the city. Those are the prevention portions of what we're trying to do here. We talk about our endangered children. I'm just looking for a slice of what I consider to be my most endangered children. Every email I have from every mother has talked about how they're a single parent, how they're working 1 or 2 part-time jobs, and how they want their child to have a positive interaction with law enforcement. Because we don't want that negative interaction with our young children, because that just seems to last and resound as the years go. So that's part of the answer, and we're only part of the solution. So that's my part right now. Go.
Yeah, actually, I agree with the speaker. About 124,000 people live in Hartford. Not obviously, the population grows during the day as people from suburbs rush in primarily to downtown. But there's 124,000 or so people sleeping here at night. The vast, vast majority of crime is committed by 500 people. And we know most of their names. And there are strategies that are designed around making life very uncomfortable once you identify who those 500 people are. Now, by the way, it could be 400, it could be 600, but statistically, that's who's committing crime. In fact, if we, to those of you who live in Hartford, if we gave you a blank piece of paper and asked you to write down the names of people who've committed crimes that you know, there would be an amazing, I bet, overlap of those individuals. So, you know, Project Longevity, which is, we are running in New Haven, has been run in other cities successfully as well, and quite frankly, the community's got to wrap its mind around it, because if you're going to concentrate on the 400 or 500 or 600 folks who are committing the vast majority of crime and the vast majority of physical crimes, then the community's got to get ready for that, because we need the efforts to be supported, we need the efforts to be understood, but there are strategies that are specifically designed to lower particularly homicides and physical assaults, and I want to bring that program to Hartford.
Mr. Mayor and Governor and panelists, thanks for coming. My name is Andrew Woods, Executive Director of Hartford Communities That Care. One of the things that happened several years ago, the City of Hartford invested in the Peace Builders and invested in some other work that we've been doing inside the city, specifically targeting youth under the age of 18. And what we were able to do collectively, along with the police department, was we were able to drive down shootings among youth age 18 and below from the high of 31 back in 2007 down to 1 victim in 2011. And mainly, the main strategies was that, as you pointed out, we identified the youth that we knew were involved with a lot of the gun violence in the city of Hartford, and the mayor's office put the resources behind it to go directly after those youth that were at risk, and again, we were able to see some tremendous numbers. One of the challenges, however, is that oftentimes when it comes down to 18 and above, it's a whole nother strategy that we've encountered. But there are strategies out there that we can, non-law enforcement strategies that have been known to make a difference, not in everyone's life, but in some. Many of us here know about the Civilians Conservation Corps model. And basically that's when you're employing folks 18 and over to work inside our park system, to work on public works jobs, and those sort of things. Working with those gang members at that age, or those who are involved with gun violence, myself and Brother Kyle Harding was able to see beef and gangs reduce the beef between each other, reduce the retaliations among each other, and we started getting them the kind of skills that they needed that eventually led them on to lives that were much more better than they had previously encountered. And so when we talk about strategies, one, certainly there are some proven strategies that we've been known to employ in this city, both below 18 and above 18. And one of the other strategies, Governor, you mentioned was around the violence-free zones. Nationally, they have shown tremendous results with working with populations of in-school youth and out-of-school youth. And we're glad to hear that some folks are looking strongly at that particular model. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kenny Jackson. I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I'm an ex-offender who got out of prison. I took a life. And I not only took a life, my son took a life, and we took a life on the same street. And now, as a father, emotionally I live with that each and every day, because a father wants to be able to talk to his son about going to school, being productive. And me and my son, we empathetically console each other behind our act. And I've been up and down the state going to different panels and stuff like that. And my thing is this, I was at John Jay College when we spoke there, and I rose the question about the interest of working with ex-offenders, because you mentioned organizations and stuff like that. There's change agents who've gotten out of prison and who are looking to make a difference and clean up the mess that some of us created. So we're an organization as well. So we need to be at the table. You know, we need to be called upon as well. You know, every issue isn't a law enforcement issue. I'm in the streets of Bridgeport each and every day, and even flooding our cities with police, there are still some arrogant police who take on the role of being the bullies that changes the mindset of youth who want to be police officers. So there needs to be more officer-friendly type relationships. There's a lot of officers who are in shape to play basketball. Okay, so police department can challenge the community in a basketball game. That's a small thing, but it will create a relationship. You know, and Andrew mentioned the violence-free zone. And we're looking to collaborate with New Haven, Bridgeport, and Hartford and try to go after resources for that. You know, I'm in the schools each and every day in Bridgeport. I've broken down certain barriers as an ex-offender getting out of prison. And our Fresh Start initiative for family reentry has other brothers who've gotten out of prison in key roles. Because it all boils down to getting a check, being able to provide for your family, and if there's no employment opportunities for men getting out, they're just going to go back to what they know. So if we can't create opportunities for men who dirtied up the streets to clean up the streets before the police are called, okay, and do things with the prosecutors and things like that, we can all network. We just need to be given that opportunity and be proactive instead of reactive.
So let me just because that you brought up an important question, and I want to sort of put the chief on the spot here. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge the presence of our public safety chair of the city council, Councilman Carl Anderson, who's here with us as well today. Thank you for joining us. So Chief, given the long-standing concerns that the community has had regarding building a culture of trust and respect between the police department and our residents, which to me should be one community, what steps are you taking, or what do you plan to do to improve that?
Mr. Jackson, you had a lot in there, and I'll address the mayor's portion. We talk about, when we talk about it all the time, the footprint of the police department being in everybody's business. Well, we don't want that anymore. We can guide, we can organize, but we want to step back. It's not so much being out there in front all the time. In regards to how our police officers act out in the public, it's one of the 4 pillars that we revolve around at the police department: our violent crime, our quality of life, and particularly our children, and most of all, our professional standards. That's been entirely reworked in the police department. It went from 4 investigators to 8. It involves inspections, it involves internal complaints, it involves citizen complaints. It's 6 months numbers last year revolved in a 30% drop in discourteous complaints. We have studies already done telling us where we have to spend more time teaching our officers how to talk to people or how to react in certain situations. So it's something in Hartford we certainly addressed already, and we're going to continue to address it because it's important to us.
Let me, Mr. Jackson, we have met before, and let me say that programs that we are bringing to Hartford with the federal authorities and state authorities actually are interventional. So when we ultimately identify the young people that we need to be involved with the most, they'll all be given an opportunity to make choices about their lives. And if they need help finding housing or finding training, or under the best of circumstances, if we can help them find a job, we'll do that. But there also then have to be swift and real reactions when we fail or they fail. And that simply has to be understood if we're really serious about doing what we want to do, and that is make Hartford safer and lower the number of shootings, although there's been a reduction, but lower it to the next level, and particularly lower homicides. So we are attuned to that, and very specifically the programs that we are working with in New Haven and hope to bring to Hartford and Bridgeport in the not too distant future are designed around those wraparound services being made available. But there's an old saying, you can lead a horse to water.
Can't make them drink.
Or think.
Good morning. My name is Beatrice Sullivan. How are you? Good. Okay. I'm here on behalf of myself and Leadership Greater Hartford. Mayor, we've been working on a program. We wanted to, our ultimate goal was to have a reentry resource center Like New Haven has a great office. We visited there. Unfortunately, the monies weren't there. We worked with TJ from your office. We did come up with a resource guide, which is very good. But we still have that ultimate goal, and we hope to continue to work with your office as well as the Reentry Council. So I hope you'll be willing to help us out.
Let me just ask, if I can, what is that office? What do you envision?
What do we envision?
Yeah.
We envision a place...
I can project better.
Much like what New Haven has. We did visit New Haven. They have like almost a one-stop shopping place. Those returning from prison can go there if they don't have an ID, if they need for job training, for job resume help.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a member of my staff to give you her card. And one of the discussions we should have is with the court system on that.
Okay. And like I said, we're still planning. We do have a reentry council, and we're going to be working very... I haven't given up, or none of us have given up on this goal.
Well, I'm not saying anything more than I'm intrigued, and perhaps we should get the court system involved in the discussion.
Thank you for being intrigued.
Okay.
My name is Stephen Gray, and I'm involved with the faith-based initiative in the city of Hartford, which has adopted Operation Longevity. And I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Hartford. I'll be celebrating my 60th birthday at the end of this month. 8 years took my birthright here. This is for the governor and the judicial members. I saw a story in the Hartford Current just the other day about a young man who was driving a car involved in a killing here in Hartford, got sentenced to 100 years. What does 100 years mean to anybody, including anyone in this room? I challenge you to fathom 100 years in jail. That's the end of your life. So I'm wondering if the governor and Mr. Lawler might be interested in looking at sentencing procedures. And because he spoke so eloquently, Mr. Jackson, who was sitting in front of me, that could be part of the sentencing guideline for ex-offenders, anyone involved in programs before we're released. That gives them a reason to live when they get out, also, instead of just dumping them out on the streets. I'd like to see some action taken on the sentencing guidelines. Thank you.
I'm nearly 60% of the way there myself. You know, I've worked on this issue of reentry and what do you do with people who come out of jail. It's one of the reasons that we pushed through a series of steps that are designed to encourage people who are in jail and are actually going to get out because they have substantially shorter sentences to finish their education, to get mental health services, to get drug or alcohol services while they're in prison. We know that if they get a GED or they take seriously their addictions while they're in jail, when they come out, they'll stay out of jail, or they're much more likely to stay out of jail. We've built in a system that recognizes that and encourages it. That did not exist in the state of Connecticut until about 1.5 years ago. With respect to additional services under difficult times, we're trying to address those. State of Connecticut needs to build additional housing. We're addressing that issue for the first time in a long time. Some people are excluded from housing because of the nature of their convictions. On the other hand, you know, we need to look at the ability to regain some abilities, some rights over time once somebody has proven themselves. It doesn't make sense to sentence someone, in essence, to a life of crime if we can sentence them to a life of recovery. So we're doing, you know, I think Mr. Lawler and his team are doing a good job of identifying best practices from around the country and including interventional services tied to when people are reentering the community, particularly when we know that person reentering the community is most at risk. So we're working on it, but it's a work in progress. And you know, I've only been at this job less than 2.5 years. Rome wasn't built in a year, nor did it decline in a year, and we got a ways to go. I'm going to have to go after whoever speaks next. I'm sorry about that, but I got to go after that. Okay.
Good to see you again,
Good to see you.
And to the panel. I just want to make a brief comment, and I'll be done. My name is Reverend Henry Brown, Militia United Against Violence. I have hundreds of vigils, anti-violence vigils, and prayer vigils as well. As a matter of fact, we're having one today, and we're having one tomorrow. But I just want to make a quick comment. I think that what happened is that when we lose our loved ones to violence, that our leaders don't show enough compassion. I mean, you know, we can sit here, we can talk all day long at the choir. But when we lose our kids to violence, innocent kids such as this Shamara Jenkins that was killed last week and a half ago, it would have been a good time for our leaders to show up and show some support for those families. We can sit here, we can talk about what we're going to do, but if we don't show the people that we really care, then we're just walking in the dark. So I just want to say, if you're going to do anything, show us that you care about us. Don't talk to us, but show us that you care about us. And also, I want to say this for the mayor, is when are we going to have a police substation in the North End? Amen. Because I agree with this lady said right here, I think the president of the police make a big difference. And then my final comment is this. We are targeting young people. We're not targeting people that are coming in our community buying drugs, that are causing the death of our young people. Our young people are dying because people are coming from the suburban areas buying drugs. So our kids have a thing where they think they own streets. They don't own streets. They don't own anything. So we have to look at the real problems and address the real issues. And to me, those are the real issues. The drug trafficking and the lack of compassion shown to these folks when they lose their loved one to violence. Thank you.
Governor, I know that you have to leave. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership in this effort, and I will continue to reach out to you. As you know, our community and our city can't do this alone. We need the state support. We thank you for what you have done, but please understand that I'll be knocking at your door and asking for more.
Sure. You and a lot of other people. Let me just have it, and then I'll get it. Listen, again, I apologize. I've got to go on to another meeting, but I know this discussion will continue. You know, a lot of important thoughts and views and emotions have been demonstrated today. I very much appreciate it. It's none of this is new to me. You know, as a mayor for 14 years, I experienced it. As a prosecutor for 4 years, I experienced it. As a governor, quite frankly, I've experienced some things that I thought I would never experience. On the other hand, we remain dedicated to what we have to do. I will say that compassion is important, but you know, we and those of us living in Hartford have to recognize we have a real problem, and we've got to get involved as adults. We have to be vigilant. Recognizing you have a problem when your child is lost is too late, and we need to be demonstrating the commitment to accomplishing that which we need to accomplish for Hartford to flourish day in and day out, 24 hours a day. And I can assure you that the issue of violence and crime is never far from my mind. That's why we look for the best practices in the nation, and that's why it's our intention to bring some of those to Hartford. Thank you all very much. I got to run.
Thanks. Good morning to our panelists, and thank you for being here. My name is Denise Best, trying to get to meet you. I'm with the Christian Activities Council, and I know that we have some troubled officers out there, but I just need to speak on behalf of those who are doing their job. I've been working for the better part of 6 or 7 years with a number of officers who are community service officers, particularly in Upper Albany, who are doing a fantastic job getting out, reaching out to the neighbors and to the merchants on the avenue who are getting the kind of intel that's necessary to do their jobs better because of the attitude that they have working with people in the neighborhood, and we should always applaud them. I know that there are good and bad folks in any organization, in any group of people, but we need to recognize the good officers who are doing their jobs. And in working closely with these gentlemen, either on the Upper Albany Weed and Seed Steering Committee or my own Public Safety Task Force that meets monthly, one of their concerns is with sentencing, not the 100-year sentencing, but the revolving door. They're concerned that these kids, when they're arrested, say, man, I'll be right back out. That's their concern, and I want to address that on their behalf. What is being done to make this a serious offense, whatever the offense is, that makes these kids know that it's not going to be easy getting in and out and back on the street and picking up where you left off. I think that's the concern of the officers, and that's the concern of the residents as well.
Basically, when someone is convicted of a crime, there is a certain penalty range that that person is exposed to. As prosecutors, we generally ask for the maximum. It's the responsibility of the judge to take a number of factors into consideration when deciding what sentence to impose. Some of you may be familiar with a pre-sentence investigation that's prepared by the Office of Adult Probation. And the Office of Adult Probation has the responsibility of investigating that person's entire background, their information about their upbringing, their education, their criminal history, their substance abuse history, as well as their mental health history. And the Office of Adult Probation makes a recommendation to the judge as to what the appropriate sentence will be. At that point, it becomes the authority of the court, the judge, to determine what sentence to impose. So whether or not a prosecutor asks for the maximum, it's ultimately the duty of the judge to take all relevant factors into consideration, as well as the severity of the crime, and decide upon the best sentence to impose. The revolving door is always an issue. It's always an issue with respect to our law enforcement officers who feel as though they go out and arrest these persons and something happens at court that results in that person being back on the street, or an offender taunting the community and saying, I'll be back out in a little while. That's something that we try to address as prosecutors, but there's always a defense attorney on the other side saying, he's not that bad. And there's always a family of that offender saying, he's not that bad. He still has something to offer, something positive to offer to the community. So maybe he shouldn't finish the rest of his life off in jail. You have all of those interests that come together, but ultimately it's the responsibility of the court to impose a sentence that the court feels fair and appropriate.
Does anybody want to hear a little more of an answer to that? Because that was a simple problem that I think creates a lot of misunderstanding in the community and the public in general. I think the issue with sentencing is very complicated, and there are a lot of different factors that play into this. There are certain types of crimes that when they're committed are horrendous. Everybody wants a 100-year sentence or a life sentence or execution when he passed. That's an abnormal reaction to a horrible crime that is part of our human nature, good or bad. And I don't think it's necessarily the best part of our human nature that brings about that desire either, to punish people forever. The factors that go into deciding what kind of a sentence are appropriate are complicated. One is, A, what's the nature of the crime that's charged? How serious is it? What's the maximum penalty? Is the person a first offender? Does the person have a history of working or being able to work potential? Does the person have a desire to improve and bring about change? Another part of it is, what's the strength of the evidence in the case? Can we prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt? We have the man standing on the corner who everybody knows is causing a huge amount of problem in the community. But who'll tell us about it? Do we have witnesses who will come forward and testify, who will cooperate, who will be available at the time the case comes up for trial? Is there other evidence to corroborate those witnesses? Will those witnesses be believed by a jury? Those are factors that go into consideration. We should not always be recommending the maximum sentence, and I think oftentimes, maybe most of the time, we shouldn't be recommending the maximum sentence. We should recommend that sentence that we feel is appropriate. Sometimes it is a maximum sentence. Go ahead, there are more questions as I'm talking. I don't want to...
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Logan. I lost a daughter in 2000, along with a niece, all in one setting, and it's been 13 years now. And every day is a day of grieving, and I grieve. For all these parents, for all the parents out here, see, it's a two-sided coin that's going on here. My friend over here, she lives on my block on Deerfield Avenue. Our block at one time was like a McDonald's, and she can tell you, it was like a McDonald's drive-thru. I mean, you could start at the bottom of the block, and you could work your way over to the end of the block and get anything you wanted. Now, I moved in there 7 years ago, and I had kids and I had grandkids, and I wanted to put a stop to this, and I tried to get with the police department and say, what can we do to help get more patrols on our block? And they offered their opinions and everything, and it worked for a couple of days, but it seems like, as always, everybody's interested in doing something at the moment that something happens. We're all, like right now, we're all in here because of the killing of the young man on Blue Hills Avenue last night, the 2 killings, the 7 killings before. We're all here now, we're all hyped up on emotions about what went on last night and what went on then. But we gotta carry this on after the person gets to 100 years. Unfortunately, the young man that killed my daughter and my niece was my daughter's baby's father. And he got the death penalty. I don't believe in the death penalty because it doesn't solve anything. I don't believe it. That's just my opinion. I battled with my family and their families over my opinion of the death penalty and everything and what he got. It doesn't serve us as a community to keep locking up our kids, our young men and our kids, and throwing the key away and giving them no help. The other thing is, I heard the state's attorney say that there's programs in prisons for them to get their GED, get drug counseling and all this. But when they get out, and even if they don't go to jail, they get that mark on them, and they give you, I had a son, he made one mistake. He made one mistake 12 years ago. He made one mistake 12 years ago, and he's still paying for that mistake. Every time he goes to put on an application for a job, there's that box. Have you ever been convicted of? Have you ever been? Now, you don't sign it, you don't click it. You may get the job, but the whole time you got the job, what are you doing? You look over your shoulder. Who's going to come in here that knows me, that knows what I might have done? Now they go and tell my employer, and I'm out on the streets again. All this boy wants to do is work. He has 2 kids, and all he wants to do is work. He doesn't want to be out here doing what he's doing. He wants to work, but he can't work because everything revolves around the one mistake. Now you said that when you go to jail, this is what I've heard since I was a little boy, you pay your debt to society. So you get sentenced 30 days, if it's just 30 days, you get sentenced 30 days when you paid your debt to society. So why can't you come out here and get a clean bill of health? And get a job and be able to live like we want to live.
you're sitting up here and you're telling the community and you're telling these kids, get out here and get a job. But 75% of our youth out here have that one strike against them. So they can't get a job. So what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to keep doing what they know to do. It's not right. I'm not condoning it. I don't condone anything that's going on. It's not right, but it's a fact. It is a proven fact that you're constantly punished for something that you did.
Sam, I just want to respond to that. And you're absolutely right. We have a substantial number of our youth that are locked in and trapped. We've started in the city to make a ban-the-box effort so that at least from the city as a corporation that represents the people of the city, we don't discriminate against people because they've had a previous arrest conviction, so that's not asked at the moment of application. We need to extend it, and I need to work with council to try to extend that to contractors and employers to open up more opportunities there. And we also need to make sure that in the capital improvement budget that I submitted, and I've been very clear with council, there is some opportunity to leverage the dollars that we spend, whether it's millions of dollars that we spend fixing sidewalks and streets and parks, that we can incorporate a training component along with whoever the contractor is, so that we can start creating more opportunities. Now, obviously, the number of jobs created, because again, here we are in a situation where we have to come up with the funds as a community to resolve issues of discrimination and things that have impacted our community for which we are not responsible. So obviously we can only do so much there, but I think that the message is to continue to give hope that we are doing more and more in what is possible. The other piece of it is to break the cycle of those things occurring, as the governor said, and I think as council is committed, and I am, is to make sure that the educational system does its maximum. We have a budget, after we provide the Board of Education with the resources from the city, we only have $250 million out of a $543 million budget. And the Board of Ed ends up with $410 million, city ends up with $250. So we have to start looking as to how to also leverage opportunities and have the educational system fulfill its responsibility as well.
Good morning. My name is Angela Freeland. I'm a resident of this community, and I'm here to speak the community and my family. I'm also representing my son, who is the president for Unity, which is a non-profit organization who is out here trying to help young people and trying to help the community. Okay, what I wanted to say is I see a lot of young people every day. I see one today who was recently released from prison, can't find a job. Right now he's homeless. Okay, a lot of these crimes do come from the people who are hopeless. Okay, and if they can't take care of themselves, they want to resort to crime, which is sad because some of them are not bad people. They just don't have a way out. If you don't have a way to live, nothing to eat, what are you supposed to do? And a lady mentioned over here about the people that you pass outside who are doing the crimes and everything, and they don't come into the centers because there's a lot of centers. Why don't we go out to them? Why don't we touch them? Because it's a lot of young people who just want to feel like they're cared for. Somebody cares. If we can't get them to come in, then the organization should come together and the churches go outside and reach them. Because their families might not be there. We don't know what they're going through. And I'm tired of seeing people, young people hurting, people dying. The two that just died, my son knew. My son knows that lost so many people, and he just gave up. Young people need hope. We need to give them hope. Okay? And as far as the applications for the felonies or whatever, erase that off of there if you can. If you go on the internet, you cannot fill out that without checking that box. Some people have paid They dead. Why do we have to suffer more? If they can't eat or feed their family, what are they going to do? Unfortunately. Thank you.
Yeah, finalize. Mr. Mayor, Chief, State's Attorney, and honored guests, this is, you said, Mr. Mayor, exactly what I was thinking, and that is jobs. They've taken the technical schools out of the educational system. And there are some young men that want to learn how to fix a car, automotive. They want to learn how to be a plumber. There are some that want these skills, but they've taken it totally out of the school system. And 30, 20 years ago, that was a real plus for some people did not want to go to college, but they offered those kinds of services and skills. Now they're out trying to find things to do and they can't. So one of the things that, and summer is coming, and so I know the police officers, our community should be totally aware, and we shouldn't just sit back and wait for the police officers to do all the work. Because as a community person, you should be able to know everybody on your street. You should have individual neighborhood blocks, and you should not wait to go to an NRZ meeting. You should not wait to go to another meeting. You should be working within your community on your own street. And you should know who's next on the street over next to you as well. Because your children are intermingling with individuals that may not have the same heart. And the hearts are not right. And so one of the things that I want to really speak about, and which is really a call to action for the community, not just for the police officers, for the community. You have to stand vigilant now. And you have to stand firm on your own streets. You have to take back your own communities. They did it before, and we can do it again. Don't wait for these organizations to do what you can do as an individual. Don't wait for them. They come together, they argue, they fuss, and they fight. But let me tell you something. You have to take back your own. You want to save your children? You have to do it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As many as 40% of the people who are in prison are people who have been out of prison and have been put back in because of technical violations of their parole or probation. I don't think that the prisons are particularly good places to learn the technical skills that were just mentioned. I think that if President Obama or President Clinton or George W. Bush had been convicted of a marijuana crime, which they now admitted they did, it would have helped their career a whole lot. So my concern is that with the program that Chief Ravella has started, the Prosper program, where the probation officers and the police are working together to keep people from going back into the prison, he needs a little additional support. There's no reason why a person who has a technical violation, I have a friend whose ankle bracelet went dead because the battery died, he's back in prison for that. I don't see that adds a whole lot to his opportunities to get a job. I know he's filled out more than 100 job applications to get a job, and this is a block. So, a judge in Hawaii has said, if you're going to do technical violations, and he's talked to all his probationers in his area, he said, we're going to try to help you to get a job, to get housing, and to go into a new lifestyle, but you've got to work with us. And if you have a technical violation, we will have a warrant for your arrest within 48 hours, and you'll go back to prison. But you go back to prison for 5 days, or 7 days, or 10 days. It doesn't interrupt the job that you may have gotten. It doesn't take you out of your community. It doesn't take you away from your family and your children. Now, for Chief Ravella to add that segment onto his Prosper program, he needs help with the judiciary and the state's attorneys. And I think people should be looking at that Hawaiian judge's program because it reduced the crime. It reduced the crime of people who were doing petty crime. As the chief said, those kinds of crimes have increased in the city. We can make a big difference if we attack that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Pastor Brian Foligo. I have a twofold question. Well, actually, it's not a question, but two things that I really want to say. One has to do also with the prison system because I volunteer with the corrections. I go and do Bible studies at the prison, and a lot of those young men, because I do it at Manson Youth Facility, that lead the streets from violent crimes, I get a chance to minister to them at Manson Youth Facility. And when I talk to them, because when I teach the Bible, I teach what's going on today. How do you live it today? Because they have to go back out into the streets. And two things that I learned from them. One is a 3-month job is no good. A 3-month job is if you don't check the box that says that you have a felony, you have a job for 3 months. If you do check it, you don't get the job. So they don't check it, so they work for at least 3 months. And then they're fired because they are called in and they say you didn't check this box after they've gone through their investigation. Secondly, the issue that I have with our community is that the federal government has a program that says if you see something, say something. How come our communities can't say something? It's like this. I grew up in Bellevue Square. I grew up in Hartford. All right? I knew what was going on in Stowe Village. The community knows what's going on. That's right. We need a program to allow people to be able to talk about what's going on. You turn the light on, the roaches are running. Turn the lights on in the street in terms of information. So if information is passed freely, so people are not worried about what's going to happen to them tomorrow, these things are stopped. I can't do anything to you if somebody knows that I did it and is going to say something. We need to be able to talk. We need to, it has to do with our churches. It has to do with our employers. We need to allow people to be able to express themselves about the things that they know about and the things that they've seen. If you talk about it, it won't happen. It won't. If I know I'm going to get caught, I'm not going to do it. I'm only going to do it when I think I can get away. And if I got that whole idea about snitching, that's the worst thing that happens to our community. Ain't no such thing as you're not supposed to snitch. No, you say what's going on. Because if you don't, it might be your brother tomorrow. And then what do? Or your son or your daughter. We have to get to a point where we're not afraid to talk. And that's something that the city government and also the community, our churches, our employers, the grocery store, wherever it is, we need to start some kind of program where we're not afraid to say what's going on in our community.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angel Baez, and I'm a supervisor with Youth Challenge. And I just like to inform the panel that we're in the forefront in trying to combat crime, as well as drug addiction and gang violence. Most of the staff of us at Youth Challenge are former gang members. I'm out of New York, and I too spent 25 years in the penitentiary. And I come out and I've done something with my life. And this is what I want to pass on to other people. All I'm asking you is give us the chance. I'd love to work with the courts, the police department, help me to rescue a life that maybe I could prevent from going the way I went. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the panel. It was very informative, but there are some things. I'm in the street every day, twice on Sunday. I get calls 4 o'clock in the morning for someone on Vine Street to escort them to Pliny Street because they're afraid they're going to get shot. I mean, that's the kind of trigger. So you know the gangs. When you work in the field as a crisis intervention, you try to stay ahead of the gang. You know what's out there because the street changes every day as we talk. It's changing. The leadership changes. You have people coming out of prison. You know what's happening. I can't tell you this. If you're engaged in the street, young people will talk to you. They're not going to talk to the police because they're not comfortable with them. But they'll talk to me. They'll come to me and say, look, yo, so-and-so have a bunch of guns up there. They depend on me getting that information to the police officers. Who shot who? But if you're not engaged and you're just going to do a drive-by in the street, you're not going to connect. These young people, they're raising themselves. They have to navigate. So they got to be careful to who they talk to. They're not going to just talk to anybody because they don't know the results of that. But if you're in the street and you're there and they think that you're real, they will talk to you because they know their life depends on it. So I just want to say this. We do need people in the street. Violence flood-free zones will work, what he talked about. We created them. I'm the one that put the concept 11 years ago. I gave the bill to Eric. Eric never funded. He passed the bill, but he didn't put any money in. So now, 11 years later, the governor's talking about putting money in. Thank you.
My name is John Thomas. I'm a Northeast neighborhood resident. Lived in Hartford all of my life. I've been part of the problem. I got recovery. 4 years now, I'm part of the solution. So I tend to want to focus on solutions. Attorney Kane mentioned that, you know, he grew up in Hartford, and I work menial jobs. I do a community organizing job for Community Solutions during the day, and I cook at a hospital at night. I barely have time for my family, but the little time that I do have, I commit to my son's schooling and providing a good example in my family. But I want to, you know, I'm encouraged at what the governor said about hope, because that's what I operate on. And it can go a long way. What Attorney Kane was talking about, growing up in Hartford, I hear that amongst many, and I don't want to be racial, but they are white who have moved out of the city. Many white people tell me, oh, I grew up on Tower Avenue. You know, and part of what I do during the day is in trying to resurrect the factory to become an economic engine in the north end of Hartford. You know, we talk about programs, we talk about initiatives, we talk about a lot of things that have been sustainable and unsustainable in the city over a period of 40 plus years. Hartford is the leader in poverty-based services. Poverty is a business in Hartford, okay? Part of my job is to put that out of business. Okay, and the only way we can do that is what I do. I walk the streets, I talk to people at their front door, I engage them, I bring them new information. You know, but what I realize about this neighborhood is I live in the shadow of the Fuller Brush Company. I'm working at the Swift factory, and all of those people who say I used to live in Hartford lived when those were vibrant economic engines in this neighborhood. They ask me, what happened to the neighborhood? What's wrong with you people? You people. Why do you live like that? How could you still live there? They act as if I got a problem for living there. And basically it's because I believe in Hartford. I'm dedicated to what I'm doing. You know, bottom line, I'm grateful that I got the chance to turn my life around that I did. I didn't get everything that I want, but what I do have, I'm grateful for. I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. But all of these problems that we have in the city, I don't put it on your shoulders. It's the people. And I ask you to give people value and create a table for us to sit at, where all of us could come together and share our solutions. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is A.J. Johnson, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Northeast NRZ. And Darlene and I, would like to thank you all for coming out to the Northeast and being a part of this discussion. And let this not be the last time. There should be, stuff like this happens in our NRZ all the time. We discuss this stuff and we don't have half the people that come. So if you're that concerned, please make it your business to come out to our NRZ meeting so we can help the problem. It's all right to talk on all these folks, and yeah, that's great, but we can handle our own problem inside our own NRZ in our area. My first question to you, Mr. Mayor, is one, we talked about ban the box, and my question to you, first question is, what are we doing on the state level to make sure ban the box gets where it needs to be? My second question is, a lot of these young people have multiple people who have died that are friends and that are family, and death is a traumatic event. And I know you have a social work degree. What are we doing to help these kids? Because they are really struggling with the idea of death. They are scared to go outside. They are scared to talk to their parents. They're scared to live and operate. We should not live and operate in fear in our own community. So what are we doing with the problem?
With respect to ban the box in the state, we had a dialogue about a year and a half ago with the local delegation. The delegation has seen a transition. We have Brandon McGee, who is here today, state representative. We have Arce and we have Vargas, who are new. So we need to re-engage them in that discussion in terms of ban the box. One of the things that I've observed as I go to the vigils and I see the mothers and the relatives of those who have been victimized by gun violence is that as a social worker, it doesn't take long to see that people who have had losses 10, 15, 20 years ago are still living in depression. My grandmother didn't smile much. She sat in the balcony for many years. So I know that. And one of the things I need to do with council is figure out a mental health component within our city budget. I spent a lot of time on the budget trying to reconcile deficits. And that's very tiring, and it doesn't let you focus oftentimes in some things that you really need to do. But we're still not done with the budget, and I think the council president and I and the people on council need to have a discussion about putting some money in. What are we going to do about affording some funding through our city budget to address the mental health needs specifically of those victims of violence that we have? We have many, but I think that we need to start at least having a place for those that are more severely depressed and need more intervention to have a place to go to. It might be in conjunction with our health director who's here, Raul Pino, other departments that we have, but we need to address that issue more clearly and establish relationships with the IOL, with Hartford Hospital, behavioral health programs, to make sure that these folks who have been living with depression, post-traumatic stress syndromes, and other types of mental health issues are addressed. So I'll invite, we're still not done with the budget. We still have a time to reapportion some resources and get that done. It's a conversation that we're also having at the U.S. Mayor's Conference in terms of how to structure more relationships under a collaborative impact model so that we can have the relationship with faith-based and other folks, but get people into a place where they can work on their feelings. Because I can tell you, it was December 1961, and my family's still not through it, so I understand. I want to thank everybody who has come out today. This is an important conversation. I want to thank the chief. I'm going to pass it to each one of them to make some final comments. Our city, and I've said this before, our city cannot succeed unless it is a safe environment that incorporates hope, safety, and opportunity. We've tried to leverage as much resources to address those areas. We need to do more. But the most valuable component that we have yet to tap is how to build up a more strengthened relationship between community, government, faith, and other communities to really work and attack this issue together. Because until our city is safe and our children do not go out in fear, we're not going to be able to transcend that ceiling that's blocking us from reaching opportunity. So I'm committed to doing that, working with our council president who's here today. They have been listening. Hopefully we will go back and work together to create policies and programs and positions so that we can advance forward. So I want to thank each and everyone for being here. Mohammed from NAACP, NAACP. He says it differently. He says NAACP. I'm sorry. I'm starting to sound like Bush. God, that's for also helping out with this. I want to hand it out to each one, and then if the council members have something briefly to say. Nothing. Okay, let's wrap it up.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this morning. What's important for me to share with you and for you to believe is that your police department is with you. They stand with you for your communities, for our communities. The doors aren't shut anymore, folks. We stand with you, and hopefully we can communicate better and make a big reduction in our crime, because they are our loved ones.